Hi guys, this is Jordan Downey, the director of The Headhunter.
Kevin Stewart, cinematographer, co-writer, and producer.
And this is Ricky Fosheim, the third and final producer of The Headhunter.
We are going to focus on this audio commentary more on the how of this movie was made rather than the why, and kind of walk you through some of the technical behind the scenes aspects. So for instance, this first scene you're watching here, this was added about 8 months after our original run of shooting ended. We decided that while editing, we were missing something, and so we went back to shoot additional scenes 8 months after the fact. This was in California, whereas the rest of the movie was shot in Portugal.
Yeah. So, and one thing to keep in mind is the three people that are here in this audio commentary right now are the three people that did most of the shooting on set in Portugal and in Mammoth, which is where this location is right now.
Yeah.
So the original first scene in the movie, in the script and what we shot, was obviously not this. It was a shot that you'll see later on in the movie that was of a horse running in and him coming into his hut covered in scars. So just try to imagine this movie with that opening scene, which you'll see in about 15 minutes.
So this jacket that he has on him, this fur there, that's literally a blanket that we bought from TJ Maxx or Ross or Marshall's, and it's just this fur blanket that we dyed black and sort of cut up and aged and made it look like kind of the hide or the pelt of some sort of a mythical beast. But that's just a blanket.
And he definitely needed it that day because it was pretty damn cold.
It was very cold while doing this. I mean, we're out in the middle of the woods. It really is as desolate as this looks here. And the snow actually that you can see sprinkling down, that's an added visual effect that was not actually snowing on set. All of the snow that is there on the ground was real, but it wasn't actually, there were no snow flurries when we shot that. We added that in post.
What's interesting about that shot we just watched, there is some blood on the sword, but it was so cold outside that the blood just froze and congealed on the sword. So it just stayed there. There's no dripping or anything.
Right.
But you can understand, I think, what that is.
So I think we went out the day before to build that hut, or at least part of it, so that it felt like it was more lived in and the snow fell on it naturally.
That's right. There's all kinds of little props and stuff. You see this little sort of almost Blair Witch stick toy that's there. We put so much time and effort into all of these things down there in the bottom left of frame that you just catch glimpses of a lot of different production design and props. And she's got blankets there, but they're clean. They're very different from him. That if he would have had furs, that they're the complete opposite of what he would look like. A lot of the snow too for the close-ups would melt on Chris and on Cora, the actress. So we actually had fake snow that we would put in his beard. You can see there on his beard and his hair and on his clothes. That was all fake artificial snow, whereas all the background snow was real. The stuff on the actor would melt, so we needed to keep that
And
consistent.
then the stuff falling from the sky was visual effects.
Right. So
it's
it's
three
actually
different
like
snows.
only a third of the snow is real.
This is one of the few shots that Kevin didn't do in the movie.
This was Chris,
Yeah.
the actor, had shot this. This is footage in Norway.
Yeah, I think he just had he was a amateur drone flyer, just did
drone
a hobby,
hobbyist,
hobbyist, and had some great footage. I think we saw on Instagram at some point, and we're like, Chris, can we use that? It looks incredible. We could just definitely put this in the movie.
Yeah.
And of course, he said yes, and he's credited on there
Yeah.
for aerials.
This title sequence was Ricky's idea, and we shot this on the last day of production. And basically, as we were tearing down the set, we had all of the props from the movie, the sack, the teeth, the monsters, and we would just cycle them through this little camera setup that we had to get these really cool macro shots. And we were creating the shadows by hand, and really kind of like coming up with this cool inserty sort of title sequence.
We kind of
That's
created
one of
an
my
assembly line of we'd put these props in front of the camera and just shoot them kind of the most abstract, weird ways we could find with some light panning on and off. And then straight from there, they would go into a giant bonfire where we would burn them and say goodbye.
You even saw that spider. How did you just randomly had that spider walk across the shot? I wasn't there when you...
I think it was. I think
we picked it up and moved it there. Like, if we saw it and then we picked it up and moved it and moved it again.
Yeah.
You've kind of forced it to
happen. I think that's one of my favorites of the
best acting
sheep leg or whatever that was, the goat leg.
Okay, now, I mean, Kevin, how we're shooting at night, that's literally only lit by fire, right?
Actually, I think we have it might be, but I think that we have a light behind the fire that was giving a little something on the building there. But yeah, we wanted to keep it nice and eerie and creepy. So one source here, maybe this is where we had the light, the supplemental light right here on this shot.
Yeah, maybe.
I can't remember, but it was very minimal. It was either fire or
right. That's a real rabbit. Actually, we cooked. There was a rabbit that one of the villagers had already
look like a rabbit.
Hunted and killed, and they were saving for something, and they gave it to us, and we cooked it, and he is actually ripping apart a real rabbit there.
Chris probably ate it too.
I tried a bite.
It was good. It was actually
good.
Okay.
It was good. Yeah.
I guess we could talk a little bit about this location right here. This hut. This belongs to my family. It's a water mill, belongs to my uncle actually, an old water mill that they used to use to produce to make flour and make bread back in the day. But now it's just an awesome little building that obviously works great for medieval film.
Mm-hmm. We had to do some modifications to it. A lot of the interior that you're about to see here was added by us. I mean, the walls and the bones of that structure were fantastic. I love that little hand shot. That's just a robotic hand that we stuck in there. It's battery powered, and you get a glimpse of it. But we added a lot of the stuff that you see in here, the shelving, some of the, the textures. If you look on the ceiling, that's all added.
Yeah, right from the get-go. It's no dialogue, man. You're really having to pay attention to everything.
Well, okay, so as we were talking about in the opening, and Ricky pointed out, this is an interesting way that we re-edited this movie. The movie originally did not show him making the potion until after he came back and used the potion on him. And we heard suggestions, and it's hard to sometimes stomach some of these bold notes, but ultimately we restructured it so that you see him making this potion, this elixir, before we even know what it's for. And that was sort of a restructuring that helped us. Now, what did you guys made the actual concoction? What do you remember? What all you put in there to get this? It was mud.
We literally put some crap in there and left it for weeks. And then I think for the actual one he put on his body, we made it like that day. That was made more food friendly. Wouldn't hurt him and get inside him.
Oh, this is a great thing. So we put hot coals on the top of that. That's actually cold water that he's pouring on top of hot coals to create the steam. It's not hot water going in. That was a cool little trick. And that's actually just an incense candle that's creating that smoke off screen.
Yeah. Those jars too was an interesting aging process of just making it look as grimy and as used as possible. There's a lot of spray glue in there to kind of give it like that texture, that old grimy, centuries old jar texture, I guess. But we just bought those at a store.
Yeah, what you're looking at is brand new props that had to be aged to make it look appropriate for the movie.
So this was actually, the weather was constantly changing here. There'd be natural fog, and then the sun would come out, and then we would literally had a fire that we were burning full of acorns and leaves and debris to try to match the fog, and the wind would change, and sometimes it looked really saucy and weird, and sometimes it looked beautiful.
Mm-hmm. We had to come out and dig this grave, which is totally off kilter, but it's kind of cool. But we had to dig this grave, early on and haul these rocks down here to this remote location. Everywhere we shot was, what would you guys, within like 2 or 3 miles for the most part, but there's still a significant amount of moving gear around.
Yeah, and we chose this location here. Obviously, those big trees are really cool, but that wall behind him,
Right.
always trying to put a little bit of, we're shooting in Portugal. We're trying to take advantage of what we have around us. In this case, that nice wall over there was pretty cool to have in the
200-year-old
background.
stone wall.
Yeah, exactly.
The audio here, if you listen closely, Eric, the sound designer, did a great job cleaning this up. But what happened is we didn't realize, but while shooting, I mean, with a small, we didn't have a production sound mixer. His microphone actually fell down his chest and got stuck behind his armor, so the audio wasn't that clean. And Eric had to clean it up as much as possible. We tried ADRing it, but it just wasn't. Chris's performance on set was just superior to that.
We do a lot of stuff on set. There's a couple, I wouldn't necessarily call them rules, but when it comes to audio, man, none of us really know how to touch that. We'll build props and light things and do anything you call for, but when it comes to audio, it's usually a trusted professionals.
Luckily, we only had 3 lines of dialogue. So
Yeah, exactly.
didn't have to worry
So
too much about
apologies
it.
if this commentary doesn't sound too good.
Every time you see that window flapping, it is controlled by us. The wind never once actually moved that damn window. We had to always have it hooked up to wires and cables to control it. So, and we'll discuss more about how we did that when you see it, but this is an interesting thing. You can see we've added some digital rain very subtly, and that's because there's this shot of the horse later on where it was actually raining, and we wanted to use that rain shot, but it's harder to remove rain from a shot than it is to add a little bit of it. So we kind of made it actually stormy here in this scene. This is one of the few visual effects shots in the movie that is coming. Oh, no, wait. That's later.
Yeah, it's the second one.
Yeah. Sorry, thinking
You're
about
already
old edit.
forgetting this movie.
Those were actually B-roll shots
just realized-
up in Humboldt in Northern
yeah.
California, which totally forgot about that. It's even another location.
This was tricky, getting the horse to sprint in like that. The ground was muddy. Getting him to fall off, that's a total cheat. We couldn't actually get a stunt there, so Chris was just kind of standing off frame and just threw his body onto the ground.
So this is the scene that Ricky was talking about earlier. This was going to be the original opening
Correct.
of the film. In fact, this was the very first scene, and we can talk about this on the next commentary, but this is the genesis of the movie, basically, this scene right here. This is how we came up with the idea for this whole entire film was this scene.
And we got more coverage, I think, on this scene than any other. I think we spent more time shooting this scene than we did any other scene because we knew its significance and really wanted there to be a faster pace to it than some of the other scenes in the movie. Oh, look at his! If you look closely at his boots, you can see like a worker boot texture down there that we had to digitally black out in a few cases.
Yeah, is it?
So that's the nasty black ooze, but the one he puts on him is a little more friendly. But Jordan did all that makeup you see right there. That did take a couple hours for you to do, I remember.
Yeah, that was all. I did all the special prosthetic effects and everything right there, and Chris was a trooper because keep in mind it's really cold out, and he's now shirtless and wet. So and you can see too, blood's pumping down his chest. We had a hose fixed on his shoulder there. And you get one take. Once he smears that black stuff all in the prosthetic, you're not going to be able to pull that stuff off and redo it. That's real breath. It's that cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't like that scene, then you don't like the movie.
Yeah, it turned out great. It was exactly what we wanted it to be, and that's an important thing. So even just that shadow there, that's the real window banging, and so that's somebody on the outside with a stick or a rod poking at it to get the window to move.
Yeah, I was talking about this earlier, but I'm pretty sure this scene was shot at night. And there might be times, or we rolled in tonight or something. It might not have been on this exact shot, but I do remember shooting this at night, which is basically one light.
Well, basically the one light that you brought, that Joker
the
800,
Joker,
it
yeah.
was kind of a perfect light to mimic the sun. So
Yeah, it was just
if you had to
coming
pick
in.
one light, it's probably a good one to pick.
But there was a slope out that window, right? So
Yeah,
you were
it
like
was-
maxed out at how high this light could
Yeah.
go, and it was not easy to work outside that window.
Like this, I think, is at night, for example.
Yeah.
This shot here. And yeah, it just mimicked the sun, and it came in with a hard, punchy light that just bounced around, and it's perfect for kind of a medieval.
I remember looking at
feel.
that on the small screen
Oh, yeah.
of the camera and thinking that wasn't going to work. And
That's a
suddenly-
mirror.
Yeah, and
That's how we
suddenly
did that.
seeing it on a bigger screen, it somehow works.
We wanted the reflection of the sword to be his only real mirror in this world, because those were sort of a luxury item back then. But we created that using an actual small mirror for that insert.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a light out there.
That one was.
Yeah. it's definitely
Kevin
nighttime.
is responsible for building this book. How this thing's
Yeah.
pretty impressive.
Well, there's a lot that went into it besides the actual like outside of it. There was all these pages were aged and made to look like some kind of parchment, old parchment, if you will. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of techniques, but
Plastic
I don't know. It was
gold.
like maybe a couple trips to Party City or something, and
Yeah.
some plastic, some glue, some stain. But yeah,
And wax.
This is a cool. So now we're starting to show off some of the monster heads. This actually was a gorilla mask that we painted white and added the fur and sort of like reshaped its expression, and then added all the gore for the severed neck stump. And a lot of that is spray foam you can buy at the hardware stores. And we kind of realized that you could mix that with red paint, and it would just then give you this goopy red gore.
if you're now listening to this after listening to the Thanksgiving 3 audio commentary, you'll realize that we also talk about spray foam and that.
Yeah, that was all spray foam. This shot, this little scene right here.
This was a reshoot.
This is a reshoot here.
8 months later, Chris has longer hair.
Yeah, we flew Chris all the way out from Norway
he
to
did
have
have
him
longer
pissing
hair.
in the woods.
So that's just, I think we had like a mustard bottle or something and filled it with black, just kind of a thick black watered down flour paste and sprayed
It
it out.
needed to be a different consistency though than the other one because it's already gone through his
Filtered.
body.
Right.
You'll notice throughout from that previous shot, Kevin would shoot certain close-ups with this specialty gold Russian Petzval lens, I think is where it's from. And
Yeah.
you'll notice it on some of the close-up. It's got this dreamy, fantastical quality to it that looks really great, especially when the trees and the leaves are all around him. Just gives it another otherworldly feel.
I'll point it out a little bit later in the film. There's specifically towards the end where it really like actually makes sense to shoot on that lens for the last sequence.
That's an example of a plastic head that we got at a Halloween store and had to corpse and age to look more screen ready.
And that metal he's banging is leather.
He's actually not banging it because
Yeah.
it would bend it. So
would
if you
ruin
look,
it,
he's
yeah.
hitting off behind the leather.
Yeah, because
Oh,
his
God.
costume was 100% leather, no metal.
I think of all the props that we were able to pull off, I think the bear trap is the one that's
You can kinda
the
see right
most
there.
questionable.
Yeah.
Right? It just doesn't pinch tight like a bear trap. I mean, we really had to cut around that prop.
Yeah. Which was literally foam, and it turns out it's really hard to find bear traps. Like even just
It
a
is,
regular
and-
metal bear trap online.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why we made it.
In a way, this shot is revealing your candle night look. This is the first time we're showing this off, but
Yeah.
I mean, you lit most of this with candles. This is real. What you see on screen that's burning is the lighting source.
We had a China ball as well, I think, here, just to kind of augment that. But for the most part, this is like a lot of candles, for example. It was important to kind of feel like everything was lit. Even if we did have an extra light off screen to pump up the ambience or whatever, it was important to feel like it was lit by the candles.
And it was, we had to go through a selection process to make sure we got the right candles. You couldn't have something that looked like it would have been from Bath and Body Works. It needed to look like it was appropriate to the time period.
Yeah, luckily we found those candles back there in the background. Those are the candles that we found that were made by villagers. They're church candles, very rustic, handmade candles that worked great.
Kevin, I think you actually did almost 100% of those zooms you see were done in camera, on set with a zoom lens.
Yeah.
Almost all of them.
Yep. The classic hand zoom.
We only had one goblin, so we just mirrored the image, and so you get the sense that there are two actually communicating. Yeah, you're right. I think all of the hand zooms, I think it's all done in camera, with just Kevin controlling it by hand, which is kind of a look, a 70s, 80s horror movie look, something that we really like. But there's a very different feeling between the zoom and the dolly. Like you're seeing here, these little dolly slider moves were pushing into him. There's something very different and eerie about the two looks.
I think this shot right here was shot with one light. And it was this concoction that Chad and Ricky came up with, which was it was a light bouncing, so it was hitting. Part of the light was hitting some trees, and the other part was bouncing off and getting the background. Just kind of did it with almost nothing, and it looked good. It was just about creating a silhouette with the house.
You can see him just splashing through puddles. That's the moral of the story for Chris. I mean, he's just constantly wet and dirty, and just look at all the grime on his body. And I had to do all that makeup and stuff too, so all of those little scratches and nicks and bits of blood.
And that was just a tarp of some sort on a stick that we flew over his face to get the shadow
his
effect.
cape. We took his cape off and we just draped it in front of the sun.
Yeah, the nicks and the makeup and all of that, like the grime on his face, that all looks really great.
That's
Subtle.
a visual effects castle.
Yeah,
that's digital.
So basically every single shot in this movie has a custom prop in it. And every single one of those props was made by hand. A majority of which were made here in LA, but made by one of us. It's just astronomical. There's thousands of them.
There is.
Yeah.
It was complicated. You really have to break down every shot or every sequence and just try and not, get overwhelmed and really try and look at. I mean, we never had this big grand plan for every single day of the shoot. We really figured it out one day at a time. I mean, we stuck to the story and the script, but we really we stayed up all night and got up early in the morning to get stuff right for that day.
And that was my biggest fear going into it, is that we could do this, but could we do this good? Can we do this great? And it's those little props and details and the costumes that all set the bar much higher.
Yeah, I remember even when we first started thinking about this film, we had a whiteboard full of things to make and do, and props and masks and everything that had to. Yeah, it was overwhelming, and it was not thousands, but maybe a couple hundred things that we had to do.
You have to prioritize like what's going to get the most screen time, and this is a really cool head coming up here, this werewolf head, and that was a werewolf head that we found from an effects artist. And we have to, none of these things come with that severed look, so we're having to then add the effect of the neck stump and then pre-cutting the forehead so that it could go onto that spike, because that spike was not very sturdy and strong, so oftentimes it would break or we wouldn't get the shot right. It took a lot of takes for it to look smooth like that.
I think that one werewolf head was one of the more expensive ones.
I think
right?
so.
I think that one was wasn't a lot, but it was probably the priciest one.
Even that chair, God, you really don't get a good look at it besides this shot, but it's such a cool prop.
Yeah, it is.
Now this was late at night. I think it was one of the last, it might have been the last thing we shot that night. It took a while for us to get him into that makeup there. And we knew that when he actually was going to put the tar on, we had one take to get it in. So I think this is the only take that we did, and we got it in the first try. And it's awesome. I love this moment. This coming up here, this dripping, like it's sometimes you do these special effects kind of movies and it turns out to be the dumbest little stuff that's the hardest to do. Like, just remember we were trying to get this drip and like to actually get the drip to come out of the blood hose at the right time. It's like that caused more problems for us than some of these other things.
I've always liked this little detail of the dripping and the moving the bucket from one head to the other. We're going to see that in a second.
Well, then this is like a transitional makeup. You had to take all the other one off and then add half the scars.
Yeah, the idea that you're getting this scarring that you might see, on somebody months after a wound like that has been sustained. But then, in his case, it's just a mere hours. Yeah, just that dripping, not easy. Might look easy. You can see all of these horse shots were all done in the same day because we only had the horse for one day. So they all have this distinctual look in the movie, and they're always raining. Mm-hmm. I don't know if people, when they watch it, can pick up on that, but those shots always look. And there's something about the moss, too, like it's greener because it had been raining.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that those all stand out to me.
We even tried, as we did all our homework with the horse. We went early and a couple days before, and Chris was in full costume and practice riding on the horse at the stable, and we thought we had it down. But then the day of, the horse was just being finicky. It was raining outside, and he was not having it.
We did all of these grave scenes as you would in production, lump locations together. So I think we shot all of these back to back in 1 or 2 days.
Maybe
all
two,
of the grave locations. Just move the camera around. That wide shot was always important to us for reasons because we needed to really recognize this location because of the importance of coming back to it. When he's carving these, that's not actually grinding anything. We just faked that. We actually put wood chips in the little grinder. It was basically a medieval pencil sharpener for a spike, but the thing was actually a sausage grinder or something, wasn't a meat grinder.
Yeah. There's a lot of little things that we've kind of reappropriated.
Speaking of dripping, this was a pain.
Yeah.
You did a lot of takes of this.
Yeah, to get it just
with
right.
the pan and a zoom and the focus.
Drone shot. We did not have a crane, but we did want to get kind of, expand the scope of things at times. So this was the first time that we used a drone. The quality isn't nearly as good as the rest of the film, but it holds up enough to serve the story. This was also sort of the locations dictated this to us. In the script, it was a tree line that he came to the edge of the woods, and that's where it was hit. But we saw this location with this single tree in the middle of a field. That's digital. That castle's not actually there. And we just thought there was something interesting about this one solitary tree.
That archer you just saw is our gaffer, Chad McClellan.
Yeah.
Since we're doing a movie with basically a 3-man crew, little else, so we gotta make do with what we have. So Chad graced us with his presence on screen there.
I love how you cut out of that shot before you can see the actual face of the monster on the paper, on the scroll. How did that monster come about? The actual drawing, wasn't that your uncle or cousin?
No, that one was that was drawn by Eric Weir, who's a Instagram tattoo artist, I believe. And we found him. He did this really cool charcoal drawings, and asked him to see if he would do a couple for us.
Right.
And he did this one based on a concept art for the head, the main head, which is really cool. I love this art.
It's really scary, yeah.
It's terrifying.
And it's really cool to just see our monster through art before we actually see it. Now we're really expanding the world, and now we're in California. There's shots in here from Norway. There is some Portugal, and this is us going out to these remote locations with the drone and the camera package, and just getting what we could get. And it really gives you the feeling that he is traveling through some exotic locations.
It was really cool. These little salt formations up in Mono Lakes in Mammoth, California. Back to Portugal.
Back to Portugal.
I love this shot, kind of like this little path where, like, where is it going to? Where does it lead to? And another path there. Even those are paths, I guess, trails maybe.
And we didn't have to paint out anything. That's real. Like, there's not any civilization back there. I mean, you can kind of get a hint of a vineyard maybe, or some sort of agriculture, but all we had to do was create this little fire pit and bring in these bones.
Vincent,
right? This was actually, we got this idea because Kevin's thesis film, he had to shoot out a night scene in the desert, but instead of going out there, he brought in a big boulder to a parking lot and shot against it. And I remember thinking about that when we were like, well, where should we stage this fire? And we thought that it would work really well to put him up against a rock, because if there's nothing behind him, that firelight has nothing to reflect off of, and he's just sitting in a black abyss.
Yeah, this is again mostly lit with just firelight. There's the main fire pit there, and then we actually put another torch off to the side to kind of give him a side key light, if you will.
And I think behind him too. That was,
and then behind
him
too,
or a torch. It might have been a torch to get the right color.
It was. You guys would put torches on C-stands. It was actually really funny to see. That's a visual effects shot.
Yep.
And he's eating sausage or something that we really cooked over the fire there. That was Chris's real dinner that night. I mean, talk about showing off Portugal. This might be the shot that's all 100% in camera.
Yeah. I know, it's kind of crazy to see. I mean, it's just a bunch of hills and mountains, but to see that with no civilization is crazy. And that's what you got going back.
We could have walked right into that castle probably. It was that just open.
I heard a story because I met somebody in Portugal that lives down in that city. It's called Field of Vipers. You remember this? Anyways, apparently the person who has the key to that castle lives down there, and it's just an old lady in the village, and you have to just go knock on the door and you can go into the castle.
Little did we know.
Wish we would have known.
I know. Because there's nobody there. Like, it's just a small town in the middle of Portugal. Like, there's no like official tours of that castle.
This was our last day of shooting. This was on our way to Spain, where Chris was going to catch the bus to his flight, or the bus to the airport. So we shot this last. It was overcast, and we went out to this lake. This is a miniature cave, actually. This is not, life size. This is just a small little crevice we came upon and realized it could sort of double as him walking into the cave, but that's all miniature.
And that big lake island you just saw was part real, part set extension, but Kevin's first visual effects pass at making that bigger and better was he went a little ham on it. It was filled with lightning and thunder, and
it was a little
jagged
bit crazy.
Everything. It was a little.
I think the main thing with when doing visual effects is I'll always dial it back, make it as natural as possible, and that's what we were trying to do. Each time we did one, it was like, it's too. It looks cool, but nah, it just needs to be more natural.
That's
more subtle.
Those sparks. We actually attached a flint rod to his wrist and then put a knife or something on the other side. So he's really creating those sparks.
Yeah, you said he wanted his costume to be like a Batman outfit, huh?
That it would have gadgets to some degree, right? There's a tool belt, and there is a Batman element to him. And if Chris looks cold, he is really cold. We he wasn't soaked in water, but we would spritz him down and make his hair wet like that.
This scene here, actually, we had the idea, or I think it was my dad that had the idea that it'd be cool if he had some kind of a healing tent or, you know, a smoke tent where you'd heal up your wounds. And we kind of met in the middle and thought that these hot springs would be a cool, interesting way of showing him heal.
Chris was genuinely pretty scared of getting in that water. You had to get in there first.
Well, there were signs.
To
There were
prove to
warning
him.
signs saying, you know, be careful. The temperatures can burn you.
Scald.
20 feet away from there was boiling,
Right.
literally.
But it was very cold out, and we did test it, and in the end, it was lukewarm. I think he actually said it wasn't warm enough to keep him from getting too cold.
It's because I volunteered to go in there before
Was that you?
him.
Yeah.
I was the guinea pig. But yeah, it was all good. It wasn't dangerous.
Yeah, that's so cool looking.
The music here is. This is, I think, all of our favorite cues and one of our favorite cues in the movie. And Nick had. This is a 5-minute piece of music with virtually no sound design. It's just there to bring the world to life, and it's all on Nick. And he did such an incredible job of you feel for this guy, and the music is carrying the story right now, and it matches the visuals as the movie has sort of expanded visually. The score has also gone to a new height that we hadn't been at prior to this.
Yeah, I absolutely love this track. It's great.
This little snow stuff was dumb luck that we got this, because day one, Chris had been in Portugal for maybe 12 hours, and we got him in the costume the next morning. We had very little time to prepare, and there was this huge snowstorm that came through in early March in Portugal, and we just walked out across the village to this little wooded area and got those shots. We didn't know if they would ever make the cut. We hadn't shot anything else. It wasn't really planned or scripted per se.
No.
And same with this, actually. It dumped snow one night early, and we were exhausted, and Kevin and I brought the camera back down and just got all these insert shots of snow and dripping and melting. And in the end, and we were kind of like, I don't know if we're going to use this, but in the end, it is the perfect transition through seasons, essentially. He was gone for that long. His boots, those are just
They're falling apart.
those are boots that are falling apart. We had one costume, and so as things went on, it starts to come apart. All those weapons back there, those big hatchets and axes are for the most part plastic that we sort of aged up to make look more metal. And there is some real metal weapons, so the key is it's like 1 out of every 3 is actually real. Now we're coming up on a very big scene, and actually one of the few times that there's a scene in this movie, a cutaway from our character in control. So I think we did this after Chris had left for that reason. And so we'd have a little wire rod on the top of that window there, and then somebody would be off screen on a ladder sort of flapping that back and forth. And the only way to bring it to life, really, but it gives it this kind of animated, monstrous sort of feel. This almost kind of like phony character-like performance to the window in some weird way that might not work for another genre, but for horror it seemed to work well.
It's definitely a little supernatural.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you were holding a big tub there, Ricky, so that when that thing actually went over, we would be able to capture a lot of that splash.
As soon as the camera panned down, the ooze ran out of the jar. So we had to supplement it with additional ooze to keep it flowing. Right there, you can
Right.
see it just like
here it
comes out. I know it's like, where did that come from?
It sloshed around somewhere
Yeah.
up top. This was pretty cool to shoot this. It was towards the end, but this is bringing our monster to life. This is a big deal. Now I don't think you can see it. We hit it well, but there's a fishing line in the bottom right that goes off, and there's a little stick or some sort of a mechanism in the sack that we could yank to actually give it some movement. It's all done practical, and there's not like this isn't a raised set, so there's no way to control things from underneath.
It was one of the creepiest shots in the movie right here.
This is just us with our hands in there. It's just us with that spinal cord moving it around in the sack. It's very careful camera placement and careful editing, because oftentimes these effects a few frames before or after look pretty bad.
Yeah, and that spine there was, I don't know, it was a
It's a snake, right?
snake skeleton, like Halloween prop or something that we just made look more gory and fleshy.
This is this snap zoom look here is
With the strings.
Yeah, we do a lot of these, talking about the hand zooms earlier. Like, there's some of these things that it's fun because you can kind of get away with that in a genre movie, and it also sort of lightens the tone a little bit when things maybe get a little too dreadful or serious. You kind of just remind people that you are allowed to have fun with this a little bit. This is a big moment here, bringing the spider to life. How in the world did we do that is one of the big questions we always get asked.
This is what the sequel comes down to right here.
Just want to call this out because this idea was actually your brother's, Jordan, right? Mike Downey.
It was.
Of putting this in when we were in the script stages of putting this into the movie to kind of help explain to the audience a little better what was happening.
So how'd we do it? We found a dead spider, and the spider that was dead had its arms and legs all facing upward, and we had a heat gun off camera that we sprayed, blasted the hot air onto the spider, and it sort of singed the spider's legs up and closed. And when we sped that up and played it in reverse, it looked like the singed legs were expanding and coming back to life.
You could actually see the little hairs around there moving really fast because we sped it up in fast motion as well as we were blasting heat at it.
Right.
It's causing all that movement.
I'd say, some of the things that, like, with a low budget, I think if we didn't have a steady cam or really any sort of stabilizer there, so some sort of shots like this, I think we would have preferred to have been smoother, whereas Kevin's just having to walk on his tiptoes and move around to kind of give you these like roving, almost POV sort of shots.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal, but I think it worked, I think, in the end. But a Steadicam would have been nicer there. It's still something a little smoother.
And this is you just... early on, we were like, how cool would it be? I don't think we've ever seen the monster's POV. You have always seen the werewolf and the van, whatever, the monster that's out in the woods lurking and watching the hero, but we've never seen it from a head on the ground. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's going to be such a cool shot to have it inching along, and then it's going to have to stop while its tail curls up and then pushes it a little bit more.
So for the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, it's all lit by torchlight.
And this might be one of those takes where we had to swap out when the camera moves off of him. Somebody had to hand him a fresh torch because we had to shoot for so long.
Yeah, this was a oneer, I think, when we're going to cut here, but at times, but this whole shot was a oneer.
It was. It does work that way. We just chose for effect
to cut it up. Yeah, but
in fact, shooting this was a little nerve-wracking because we had pushed this scene off towards the end, and Chris was leaving maybe the next day after this. And I remember we had all sorts of plans for what he was going to do. Just how he was going to find this sack. And we ended up just kind of saying, let's just follow the character and kind of just and let the camera sort of follow him instead of cutting it up and getting really creative with all of our shots. And
yeah, it's kind of an example of when you have to kind of the shootings come. It's down the line and somebody's leaving, the actor's leaving the next day. It's just make do with what we have and not have as much coverage ends up being better for the scene.
There's all these little coordination things here. Like, for instance, this is a great shot. And you would have him move the torch around, right? For lighting,
Yeah.
so it now wraps around.
And then he moves it over here in a sec.
The character would have no reason to put the torch behind him. It's only for lighting.
For dramatic effect.
Right.
And lighting, yeah.
Yeah, it's just not as interesting if it's just always in front of him. The direction of the light's going to be frontal and flat. So that's why I tried to have Chris kind of put it to the side, at least to give him a little contrast.
This actually, a lot of this stuff coming up here too was kind of inspired by how much fun we had making our short Critters film. That if you haven't seen, you can find it on YouTube. But that was essentially just a bounty hunter hunting a monster. And I remember just thinking, well, we really liked that and had success with that we should expand upon that. So this kind of begins this elongated form of that Critters short film in a different movie.
A monster rolling around on the ground.
It's not that different, really.
Yeah, it's pretty similar.
I remember when we were one of the tests we did was for torch fuel. Like what kind of I think we used lighter fluid at first, and it was just wasn't burning bright enough for it to be lighting the scene. And so we finally found that kerosene was going to be the way to go. It would burn bright and it would burn long, and long meant 2 to 3 minutes maybe. See it dying down right there a little bit. There'd be times where it would die down, but for the most part, we got it to work.
This was not intended on set to be this POV. It was, in fact, I think he at times is in the shot here, and we had to kind of punch in, and then we put a transparent mask layer over top. But this was shot with him in the frame at times, or it was kind of his POV, but it wasn't supposed to be through the mask.
Yeah, but it's a great moment. It works really well.
You know, the key to this monster is just less is more, and showing glimpses of what this thing is, and oftentimes too, because the monster head was maybe 12 inches tall, and we really had to avoid the puppeteer hand and all of the controls for it.
And all that underwater stuff in this previous shot and the 2 shots earlier in the movie were all shot in Jordan and Kevin's apartment here in Los Angeles many months later in a fish tank.
Yeah, it's all miniatures in a fish tank.
That we returned to Amazon.
Of course.
Hey, when you're making a $30,000 movie, like you got to do what you got to do.
Amazon's definitely your best friend.
Amazon's a friend.
Give them a credit.
There's an example of the torch kind of dying down a little bit.
And an example of a torch going through a dry patch of woods. We were very careful and concerned at times about that, and had to be really smart.
We'd have to be
branches there.
we'd have to be a lot more careful if it was summer. So it was luckily it was winter, but still, yeah, we were pretty concerned with that and didn't want to set this whole valley on fire.
That's a great moment of just showing off like that there isn't any other elements around this guy. It is a guy with a torch, and that's also how it was shot. And the puppeteering and control of this monster is very, very basic. I mean, it's no different than just grab a rod, put a dowel rod or something on this, and try and kind of scramble it along the ground. And, out of your 10 to 20 takes, one of them works for a few seconds, and you go with that one.
Yeah, for this we were out in the middle of the woods. No power, no anything, so there's literally no lights except for that torch there.
Here's an example. Focus is on something in the foreground, and the effect is happening in the background.
Right, less is more always. What you don't see is what's scarier, I guess.
Its voice, you hear a glimpse of it saying body there. Its voice was actually voiced by a female that we pitched down. We realized that was actually better. Not that the gender of this creature really matters, but trying to figure out the specifics of, is it male, is it female, is it pitched up, is it pitched down, is there any effects on it, took us a number of tries and actors to figure out the right one for the voice of the monster.
I love this shot. I remember filming it and just knowing it was something special.
It's just Kevin running along with the camera there with him. Now to get that sky, we can't actually shoot when it's that dark. So you're darkening things in post.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some of that is more dusk and evening.
Exactly, and especially that running shot was definitely a lot more evening and brought it all the way down.
I think, Ricky, you dug like a trough here so that we could somehow puppeteer this thing underground. So we dug a trough so that you could then reach into this sort of little like tunnel and move a rod or something.
Yeah, with a long stick.
That shot we just saw of the hand was that was also done up in Mammoth during pickups, but that was one of those claw.
Yeah.
What are those? Like a Terminator claw? Was that what that was?
Yeah, kind of like an old Terminator
Something that you'd
hand.
put in a fish tank, kind of, to grab.
Yeah, one of those like
a
grabbers.
grabber.
Yeah, it's a grabber. And then what we did is we glued some pieces of bone on it and made it and corpsed it, and then made it work so that it looked like a skeleton hand was coming back to life. It worked pretty well.
This was a pickup shot, not in the original cut. We went back and got this, and it's
This whole scene.
terrifying. This whole scene, this whole moment. That is all practical. We had fishing lines and rods that are giving it movement, and people with their hands on it, lifting it up off the ground, but it's all on camera.
That scene was probably the biggest applause we got at the premiere of the festival. One of them, I'd
Yeah,
say. That one of
it
it
was.
coming back to life.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the creature is sort of mounted on a stand of some sort, and we're just kind of rotating it around there. You can actually see he's wearing mud boots there because he has to go into the water, so you get a glimpse of...
I was wondering about that. I thought I'd noticed that.
Yeah.
But yeah, those aren't his real boots there. Blooper.
Now, the cave. This was by far the hardest and worst shooting conditions of the movie, going into this cave location. But it worked so well for the climax and is such a cool location that we knew we had to shoot it. It's a water mine that was sort of dug out of this hill to irrigate this field out here, and Kevin's family owned this property. We had to clear out everything. This was filled with brush. You couldn't have gotten a shot like this before we got in there.
It was probably 18 inches wide at the widest, maybe 6 or 12 inches
shoulder
wide.
to shoulder, basically.
Shoulder to shoulder, and 6 feet tall, about 100 yards long. And for as nasty as the conditions were, I don't remember any one of us ever really getting truly upset living in that tunnel for 3 days. I think we just kind of...
Deep down,
maybe.
I got really sick one day out of nowhere. We were shooting and I just woke up and felt horrible. And those guys went and shot some other stuff, and I just slept all day and got better. And I think it was because of that cave. Because we're breathing in fumes. We had to be very careful about how long that torch could be in there, because the smoke and the exhaust from it essentially had nowhere to escape. So we had to go in there very briefly and sometimes just hold our breath, get a shot, and come back out.
Yeah, that was... I mean, out of everything that we did, that's probably one of the most dangerous things we did was this. We just have to be careful. Like, you see the fumes right there.
Yeah, if you would have got caught
so we were in there, I don't know,
you got
30
lightheaded.
seconds. Yeah, I got lightheaded at one point. There's no real air. You're burning whatever fumes that is.
Kerosene on a stick.
But that was actually kind of part of the reason why we lose the stick here coming up, was we lose the torch. I mean, it was because we weren't going to be able to shoot this whole scene with a torch, but also to change up the look and kind of give it a little bit of an arc. But that was part of the reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, part of it is story reason. It makes it more difficult for him to fight the monster, but part of it is just we couldn't film like
production
that.
purposes, right?
Now those sparks that we've set up here, that's real. That's all being created. The light that's being created from these sparks.
Mm-hmm. So now that he loses his torch, there's really nothing to illuminate him, or at least there's no source. There's no motivation for it. So we had to be creative here with the lighting and have a little bit of an unmotivated source, I guess. This is all, that's supposed to be his eyes adjusting to the darkness there. That's why I got a little bit brighter. And then here is just a little bit of a sourceless ambient light coming from the front, just so you can expose the image a little bit. And then the background here, you just try and separate him with the light. Where is that light coming from? It doesn't matter. It's just creative choices here. But it was a challenge, though, in terms of trying to make this interesting.
For a horror movie, you're used to these sort of things that for a small bit of time, I think, can get away with it.
Mm-hmm. That's the end of the tunnel there.
It is. That's the real end down there.
And there was just off to the side, there was just an LED light kind of rimming the whole cave.
This is a visual effect of something crawling up there, just a hint of some sort of movement. And shooting the monster in here, I mean, talking about the difficulties of shooting just him in this cave. Now imagine staging some sort of fight scene between two people or two things in this tight space. It worked for the story, but it was also very difficult. He's having to spin around and he's scraping his arms on these walls and splashing in the water, and that's Chris doing all of that stuff. And
that shot right there, that close-up, is filmed in a Mammoth Lakes 8 months later.
Against a rock.
Against a random little 4x4 foot rock.
I was puppeteering this monster and had to just sort of be down below, kind of almost like in Chris's chest, for the scenes where you only see the close-up of the face. We had a few heads. There was sort of the head that was kind of a stunt head. Some of that spine stuff was done in reverse. Sometimes we just kind of wrapped it around his head and tugged at it. But I remember this knife stuff. Chris was so intense in this scene. He's like pounding on this thing, and like, there was times where I was just like, all right, Chris, you gotta like not slam into my head, because I'm right there 6 inches in front of him. Kevin's right there in his face.
This is just a great shot right here, and just him covered in blood, and
we just kept spraying him.
All in his eyeballs.
His breath falling down. It's great.
You know, that's when you go to these remote locations and you shoot in these sorts of difficult spots and weather, you get shots like that where there's water and there's breath and you're in this tight thing. If you were to build that set, you're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to temperature control a sound stage, to have there be water on the ground, to have this. It's you can't pay for that production value in some ways. This was drone footage that you had just taken at a completely different trip to Portugal, that we were looking around for some sort of a kind of majestic sunrise shot.
Yep.
The actual weather in Portugal was kind of on our side, right?
Yeah.
Because we were shooting into, spring was coming closer. And
yeah, we got a little bit of everything. Snow, sun, fog, rain. All great elements for a film like this. Want a little bit of everything. And specifically, we chose to shoot these scenes whenever we had sun, because it was more of a hopeful,
right,
victorious, scene.
Right, it was. But this one I remember too was frustrating for you, because this was one of the few times that we had this sort of harsh sunlight in the movie.
Right. In the end, I think it worked really nice for these scenes, though. Just to completely change the mood of the film and the atmosphere and what this character is feeling, which is some sense of relief, I guess.
Right. These were very difficult for Chris too. I mean, he knew the importance of these scenes and what was what needed to happen here. And there's not much to this. I mean, it's this prop body that we had. The idea came to us when we knew that we were going to go back and shoot the scene of the girl here, Cora. The idea of intercutting these two scenes became something that I think that really was what sold us on going back to shoot this, was knowing that we could intercut that and that it would have a pretty big impact on viewing this moment.
There were many, many weeks in the editing room of rearranging scenes and writing hypothetical scenes that we could go shoot, or hypothetical shots. A lot of piecing together the puzzle.
Yeah. The whole daughter stuff was part of a reshoot, and clearly, as you can see in this scene, it just has such an emotional impact and changes everything, and I'm so glad we did it.
This bow and arrow that he builds here, when he fires the arrow, it really was from this little bow and arrow we built out there that day in the woods.
Here's that lens that Ricky was talking about earlier, the Petzval gold lens that kind of distorts the background, and it's fitting for this sequence here because, again, it's a release and there's hope, and so that magical quality to the lens kind of really works well for that.
That arrow is added later on. We could not have just see our monster through art before we actually see it. Now we're really expanding the world, and now we're in California. There's shots in here from Norway. There is some Portugal, and this is us going out to these remote locations with the drone and the camera package, and just getting what we could get. And it really gives you the feeling that he is traveling through some exotic locations.
It was really cool. These little salt formations up in Mono Lakes in Mammoth, California. Back to Portugal, yeah.
Back to Portugal.
I love this shot, kind of like this little path where, like, where is it going to? Where does it lead to? And another path there. Even those are paths, I guess, trails maybe.
And we didn't have to paint out anything. That's real. Like, there's not any civilization back there. I mean, you can kind of get a hint of a vineyard maybe or some sort of agriculture, but all we had to do was create this little fire pit and bring in these bones.
Vincent,
right? This was actually, we got this idea because Kevin's thesis film, he had to shoot out a night scene in the desert, but instead of going out there, he brought in a big boulder to a parking lot and shot against it. And I remember thinking about that when we were like, well, where should we stage this fire? And we thought that it would work really well to put him up against a rock, because if there's nothing behind him, that firelight has nothing to reflect off of, and he's just sitting in a black abyss.
Yeah, this is again mostly lit with just firelight. There's the main fire pit there, and then we actually put another torch off to the side to kind of give him a side key light, if you will.
And I think behind him too. That was
and then behind
a light
him too,
or a torch.
Yeah,
it might have been a torch to get the right color.
It was. You guys would put torches on C-stands. It was actually really funny to see. That's a visual effects shot.
Yep.
And he's eating sausage or something that we really cooked over the fire there. That was
Yeah.
Chris's real dinner that night. I mean, talk about showing off Portugal. This might be the shot that's all 100% in camera.
Yeah. I know, it's kind of crazy to see. I mean, it's just a bunch of hills and mountains, but to see that with no civilization is crazy. And that's what you
We
get
could
going
have
back.
walked right into that castle probably. It was that just open.
I heard a story because I met somebody in Portugal that lives down in that city. It's called Field of Vipers. You remember this? Anyways, apparently the person who has the key to that castle lives down there, and it's just an old lady in the village, and you have to just go knock on the door and you can go into the castle.
Little did we know.
Wish we would have known.
I know. Because there's nobody there. Like, it's a small town in the middle of Portugal. Like, there's no like official tours of that castle.
This was our last day of shooting. This was on our way to Spain, where Chris was going to catch the bus to his flight, or the bus to the airport. So we shot this last. It was overcast, and we went out to this lake. This is a miniature cave, actually. This is not, life size. This is just a small little crevice we came upon and realized it could sort of double as him walking into the cave, but that's all miniature.
And that big lake island you just saw was part real, part set extension. But Kevin's first visual effects pass at making that bigger and better was he went a little ham on it. It was filled with lightning and thunder, and
it was a little
jagged
bit crazy.
Everything. It was a little.
I think the main thing with when doing visual effects is I'll always dial it back, make it as natural as possible, and that's what we were trying to do. Each time we did one, it was like, it's too. It looks cool, but nah, it just needs to be more natural.
That's
more
subtle. Those sparks. We actually attached a flint rod to his wrist, and then put a knife or something on the other side. So he's really creating those sparks.
Yeah, you said he wanted his costume to be like a Batman outfit, huh?
That it would have gadgets to some degree, right? There's a tool belt, and there is a Batman element to him. And if Chris looks cold, he is really cold. He wasn't soaked in water, but we would spritz him down and make his hair wet like that.
This scene here, actually, we had the idea, or I think it was my dad that had the idea that it'd be cool if he had some kind of a healing tent or a smoke tent where you'd heal up your wounds. And we kind of met in the middle and thought that these hot springs would be a cool, interesting way of showing him heal.
Chris was genuinely pretty scared of getting in that water. You had to get in there first.
Well, there were signs.
To
There were
prove to
warning
him.
signs saying, be careful. The temperatures can burn you.
Scald.
20 feet away from there it was boiling,
Right.
literally.
But it was very cold out, and we did test it, and in the end, it was lukewarm. I think he actually said it wasn't warm enough to keep him from getting too cold.
It's because I volunteered to go in there before.
Was that you?
Before him.
Yeah.
I was the guinea pig. But yeah, it was all good. It wasn't dangerous.
Yeah, that's so cool looking.
The music here this is, I think, all of our favorite cues, and one of our favorite cues in the movie. And Nick had, this is a 5-minute piece of music with virtually no sound design. It's just there to bring the world to life. And it's all on Nick. And he did such an incredible job of, you feel for this guy, and the music is carrying the story right now. And it matches the visuals. As the movie has sort of expanded visually, the score has also gone to a new height that we hadn't been at prior to this.
Yeah, I absolutely love this track. It's great.
This little snow stuff was dumb luck that we got this, because day one, Chris had been in Portugal for maybe 12 hours, and we got him in the costume the next morning. We had very little time to prepare. And there was this huge snowstorm that came through in early March in Portugal. And we just walked out across the village to this little wooded area and got those shots. We didn't know if they would ever make the cut. We hadn't shot anything else. It wasn't really planned or scripted per se.
No.
And same with this, actually. It dumped snow one night early, and we were exhausted, and Kevin and I brought the camera back down and just got all these insert shots of snow and dripping and melting. And in the end, and we were kind of like, I don't know if we're going to use this, but in the end, it is the perfect transition through seasons, essentially. He was gone for that long.